And following up,
So,
let's talk about building partnerships to unlock economic growth and social development in the African continent. It is my pleasure now to talk with the CEO of the new Economic Partnership for African Development, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki. Hello, Dr. Mayaki.
Hello.
Hello, can
Um,
you hear me?
Good. Yes, I can hear you, and it's a
Nice.
pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Mayaki. Are you hearing me? Nice, very nice. Okay.
Yes, I do hear you
Perfect,
perfectly.
perfect. We are just adjusting here the mics and setting the things up for us to have our moment. We are going to have this rapid fire talk, 50 minutes for us to address the most urgent needs in Africa right now, Dr. Mayaki. And I'd like to ask making a question, because I know that NEPAD has organized some strategies to respond to the pandemic in three levels. I saw some of your interviews doing national, regional, and also in the level of the continent. So I'd like you to
Yes.
start talking to us. How is this work going on? How is this flow moving around these three strategies you have settled up? But before you start, I have to say that Professor João Bosco Monte says some greetings. He was just at the stage
Okay.
moderating a panel, but he has to leave right now to set up some stuffs. And he
Okay.
say hello and welcomes you also to the Brazil-Africa Forum.
Thank you. It's very kind. It's very kind. So, to answer your question, I will flag very quickly 3 points. The first point is that it has to be recognized that Africa has faced the pandemic with a very quick and coordinated response. And that quick and coordinated response was managed fundamentally by the African Union. And I am the head of the African Union Development Agency. And we followed the CDC very carefully, and we established a roadmap. So on the domain of health response, we had a coherent strategy, which was based on collecting data, organizing the lockdowns, semi-lockdowns, and trying to figure out the socio-economic impact of a pandemic. It's important to note that globally, if we look at the number of deaths in the continent, it is roughly equivalent to the number of deaths of the city of New York. And these numbers are quite correct because Africans culturally cannot hide their death, their dead persons. The second point, as a development agency, we reviewed totally our work plans and mainstreamed the response to the pandemic. And we did that on 2 critical domains. The first one was to support micro, small, and medium enterprises, which are the enterprises employing more than 80% of Africans. And as you know, one of the consequences of the pandemic was a high level of unemployment. So we had to really support these micro, small, and medium enterprises. So we did that by liaising with commercial banks, development banks, and organizing digital platforms in terms of academies, which could support micro and small medium enterprises in their management systems, digital platforms for access to market, digital platform for access to finance, in order to teach them how they could best access to available finance. So we called that the 100,000 MSMEs, 100,000 micro, small, and medium enterprises. It's our target. Evidently, it is a small number. But what we are looking through this process is to build a best practice that can be enlarged to the rest of the continent we are now in 26 countries, but could be enlarged to the whole countries, member states of a continent. And the third point is on food systems. As you know, the global value chains were disrupted. Africa imports for around 55 to 60 billion dollars of food. That's what we import, and according to FAO. So with the disruption of global value chains, we had to reorganize internally, and that meant that it was important to facilitate the flow of goods and make sure that borders were managed in a way which could allow an adequate flow of goods. It didn't go very well everywhere, but after a certain number of months, we can say that from September, important progresses have been made, and we have a specific program in that domain, which we call the one-stop border post, where at any border, we have joint border posts and not two different border posts. So health response, socio-economic response, and response in the domain of food systems. So that's how we responded to the pandemic. And going forward, if I may, we will have two fundamental objectives. The first objective will really be to enhance the capacities of local communities in terms of digital tools. We have realized that digital transformation can help Africa leapfrog. This has been realized a long time ago. And as you know, Kenya is a leader in the world in digital tools regarding finance. But we think that we should give that aspect a very essential role. And the second domain beyond this one is that we need to rethink the way we have been mobilizing resources. Africa has doubled the size of its economy in the last 15 years. We have done that by increasing our fiscal pressure a little bit and by having debt. And now, as you know, we are faced with a serious debt issue. So we need to rethink the way we mobilize resources. And this is where the issue of partnerships is becoming important.
Dr. Mayaki, I know that you have identified also in Brazil some possibilities for new cooperations and some fields of interest. May you tell a little bit of us what you are approaching in Brazil? What are the expectations for this relation?
Well, as you know, Brazil, many people don't know, but Brazil has the equivalent of the GDP of Russia. So Brazil is not an emerging, it's an emerging economy, but it's a very important emerging economy because economically it has the weight of Russia. And Brazil is a big economic player. We have gone to Brazil as AUDA NEPAD several times in the last years, and I can tell you that the partnership we have built have been fundamentally linked to agribusiness. We learned a lot from what was being done in terms of increasing productivity and in terms of research, agronomic research. This is an important point. Secondly, we have built partnerships in biotechnology because AUDA NEPAD is the leading institution in the implementation of regulatory systems in biotechnology in Africa. So we have liaised with Brazilian partners in that domain. I think it was very important for us to do that because we learned a lot. And as you know, there are big Brazilian companies which are investing in the continent. It goes from agribusiness to infrastructure. And with these companies which are investing in many countries in the continent, we tend to highlight what are the best practices, what is the best environment which can help them invest more. So we are looking for higher investments from Brazilian companies which are multinational, and we are looking for best practices in the domain of research and in the domains of agribusiness and biotechnology.
Talking about infrastructure, you have mentioned it. AUDA NEPAD have developed right now the PIDA quality label to ensure that excellence in the preparation of the infrastructure projects in Africa. So what are the expectations you have in a short, medium or long term to try to improve this technical field?
Let me allude first of all to the contextualization of infrastructure. When most African countries arrived to independence at the end of colonialism, they were faced with extractive infrastructure. To cut the story short, you had a mine, you had a port, and you had a road between the mine and the port. So this type of infrastructure was not inducive for development. So all of this system had to be reframed. And PIDA is the essential tool that we are using now as a continental strategy, which has priority programs in infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean transport infrastructure, energy infrastructure, IT infrastructure, fiber optic infrastructure. So this is what we have done through PIDA. Prioritization in order to have quality infrastructure. Quality infrastructure means an infrastructure which is and which has a socio-economic impact. So a road is not built just to build a road. A road needs to have a socio-economic impact. A rail needs to have a socio-economic impact. So in the PIDA quality label, there is an important dimension which we call the corridor approach, integrated corridor approach. If we want to accelerate the integration of a continent, we need to think regionally. And the best way to think regionally is to have corridors. And as you know, the rail system in Brazil, many studies have been done and have shown that the rail system helped boost the development of Brazil. And somehow it had a corridor type of thinking. So this is an approach which will be very useful, but we are practicing quality infrastructure, corridor approach. And the third aspect which we consider critical in PIDA is energy. If Africa wants to industrialize and increase the ratio of manufacturing to GDP, we absolutely need energy. Energy will be the critical element that will help, boost not only agricultural productivity, but fundamentally all the segments of industrialization and manufacturing. So, and energy means especially renewable energy, because we want our industrialization to have a green dimension. We don't want to make the errors which have been done in the past by other countries. And we can leapfrog by thinking in terms of renewable energy so that we attain the objectives that we are looking for in terms of sustainable infrastructure. So our PIDA quality label is about that.
Dr. Mayaki,
evidently, it has to also lead to job creation.
Sure.
Because,
Sure, perfect, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki. I'm afraid we have reached our time for today, but thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to hear from you, and also it's always a pleasure to know the work that AUDA NEPAD is doing. I don't know if you'd like to share just a short message for us to end regarding this moment we are facing.
The short message I would like to share is that Brazil and Africa have had a long history of cooperation. We are culturally linked. And beyond the cultural links that have cemented our cooperation, we need to move now to another degree, which is sound economic cooperation. And it is coming, it is being mainstreamed, and this is a message for the young Brazilians and the young Africans. They have a role to play in shaping what will be an ideal type of South-South cooperation. And we should help create the environment that can help young Brazilians and young Africans get together so that they are really committed to strengthen this type of cooperation, and I'm convinced that it will happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, for joining us today. Thank you very much for your remarks. It's a pleasure to receive you here, and please keep following the Brazil-Africa Forum as well. Thank you.
Thanks to you. It was a pleasure, really. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are